When you look at the headlines today, it can all feel so disconnected, chaotic even. But what if I told you that a sex trafficking scandal, a secret network of billionaires, and a vulnerable teenager are all connected? And not just connected, but tied together by a single, powerful idea that has haunted America for centuries. Let's dig in and see how deep this connection really goes.
So to help us make sense of all this, we're going to lean on the work of historian Heather Cox Richardson. Her analysis is incredible at connecting the dots between the news we see today and these really deep, recurring patterns in American history.
It all kicks off with two stories that, they just seem like they're from different planets. On one hand, you have the huge, powerful, and frankly, disturbing network of the late Jeffrey Epstein. And on the other, you have the story of a 17-year-old homeless girl allegedly paid for sex by a U.S. congressman. So what on earth could possibly link these two things?
All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start with those two stories, then uncover the ideology behind them, this idea of a new aristocracy. We'll trace its echoes all the way through American history, look at the real-world damage it's done, and then bring it all right back to today, before we end with a really powerful warning from Abraham Lincoln himself.
Okay, first up, let's really get grounded in the headlines that sparked this whole conversation.
So first you've got this story from the New York Times about a homeless high schooler. All she needed was money for braces, and she was allegedly pulled into the orbit of Congressman Matt Gaetz. Now, at the very same time, new documents are coming out about Jeffrey Epstein's estate, showing a whole network of powerful men who kept hanging out with him even after he pleaded guilty to soliciting a minor. It's like The Guardian put it, this is a world where if you're inside that circle, the rules of the outside world do not apply.
So you have to ask, right? What kind of thinking, what kind of philosophy allows powerful people to believe that they are just above it all? Well, it turns out there's an actual ideology behind it.
And it's an idea that's being pushed hard by these really secretive, super well-funded organizations, like the Rockbridge Network. The Washington Post did a profile on them, and its founder, Chris Buskirk, he flat out calls his theory an aristocrat. It's the idea that a small, special group of elites are the only ones who are really suited to lead the country.
And get this, here's how they sell it. Buskirk says his vision is for a proper elite that takes care of the country so that everyone prospers. It's this defensive rule by the few, but it's all wrapped up in this language of being good for everybody. But is it really new?
Yeah, not even close. This argument is like a ghost that keeps showing up in American history. It almost always pops up whenever a small, powerful group wants to justify why they should have all the wealth and all the control.
You can literally pinpoint it to these key moments. In the slaveholding South of the 1850s, during the crazy rich Gilded Age of the 1880s, and right at the start of the Great Depression. So back in 1858, you had Senator James Henry Hammond arguing that society needs a mudsill class, a bottom layer of people to do all the hard labor. Why? So the elite class can be free to lead progress and, civilization. Then, a few decades later, Andrew Carnegie makes basically the same case in his Gospel of Wealth. He argued that the rich were just better at managing money, so they should control it for the good of everyone else. See the pattern? Different times, same exact idea. Some people are born to rule, and others are born to serve them.
Okay, so these are just ideas, right? Words. But do they actually hurt anyone? What happens when this philosophy hits the real world and becomes actual policy?
Let's just put it out there. Does it really matter what a handful of powerful people believe about their place in the world? Well, history's answer is a big, resounding yes.
And the fallout, it's absolutely devastating. Hammond's mudsill idea, that helped justify the Dred Scott decision, which said Black Americans weren't citizens and had no rights. Carnegie's philosophy, it led to court decisions that killed laws protecting workers from being overworked. And Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon's advice to just liquidate the average worker during the 1929 crash, that helped kickstart the Great Depression and the Hoovervilles that followed. So let's be crystal clear. These ideas have very, very real consequences.
And that, right there, brings us right back to today. If this old idea is making a comeback, what does it actually look like right now in our world?
Well, for starters, it looks like a mind-boggling amount of wealth concentrated at the very, very top. According to the Wall Street Journal, the top 0.1% of U.S. households now have $23.3 trillion. Meanwhile, the entire bottom half of the country, they have just $4.2 trillion. Think about that.
What happens is, this crazy amount of wealth creates a bubble. an ecosystem where the super rich are totally sealed off from the rest of us. But it's not just that. The ideology then uses the power of the government against people it decides are, less than. We see it in policies that criminalize people for being homeless, all in the name of moral development. And we see it in rules that try to erase the legal identity of transgender Americans by forcing passports to reflect only the sex assigned at birth.
Look, this whole pattern, this playbook of the elite justifying why they should be in charge and the harm that follows, it is nothing new. And one of the sharpest minds in American history saw it coming a mile away, more than 160 years ago.
Back in 1858, Abraham Lincoln just cut right through all the fancy talk. He said that any argument that puts one group of people over another, it doesn't matter if it comes from a king or from a slave owner, it is, and I quote, all the same old serpent that says you work and I eat, you toil, and I will enjoy the fruits of it.
See, Lincoln knew that the powerful always have a reason why things should be this way. They always claim that the people are better off for being ridden. And that just throws us right back to where we started with that 17-year-old girl who just needed money for braces. And it leaves us with Lincoln's haunting question, a question we really have to ask ourselves today. Who exactly is better off for being ridden?